where Kaiser Charlemange sleeps until the Golden Age. Art and Story by Gisa. From the balcony of my grandparents in Freilassing, a small city right across the Austrian border town of Salzburg, you can see Mount Untersberg rising up steep from the plain of the river Salzach. On long, hot summer days, my grandfather would take my brothers and me up to the top of the Untersberg. He told us many stories about this limestone monolith that to me seemed higher than Everest, while we ate our lunch, sitting at the summit that always seemed surrounded by noisy ravens that were after your sandwich. Its numerous caves were said to be the home of giants and dwarfs, and in some of the caves, legend has it, time slows down, or even stands still. My favorite story is the saga of Kaiser Karl, also called Charlemagne, who lived from 747 until 814 AD. He ruled over wide swaths of Europe, from the Baltic Sea to the Mediterranean, from Spain to Hungary. His fame and legend grew over the centuries. Admired by many, he was called the ideal emperor. In one of the legends my grandfather told us, Charlemagne sleeps deep in his Bavarian mountain until the world's suffering reaches its fullness. Then he will rise up and lead his knights into the ultimate battle against evil. When victory is theirs, a golden age of prosperity will begin, and humanity will live in peace without pain, war, illness, and suffering. The emperor will hang his sword for the last time on the branches of an old pear tree beside the battlefield after victory is his. For years, the following story returned to my dreams whenever I slept in my grandparents' old creaky house. Once, a poor shepherd boy was grazing his flock at the foot of the Untersberg. He sat on a mossy stone and whittled away at his willow pipe, occasionally casting a watchful glance at the grazing lambs and goats. When he grew a bit bored, he would look up at the summit and imagined himself soaring with the numerous ravens that always were playing in the air and rising and falling with the winds. Suddenly, as if growing out of the ground, a dainty dwarf with a green hat and a little red beard stood before him. "Hello, dear boy," said the dwarf. "Would you want to see the Emperor Charlemagne in the Untersberg?" The boy replied that he would very much indeed, and followed the dwarf through the bushes, over boulders and ravines, and deep into the interior of the mountain. At last, they arrived at an enormous iron door that was firmly locked. There was no door handle, and neither keyhole nor lock was to be seen. But the dwarf made a lightning-quick gesture with his tiny hand, and the door burst open with a thunder. A large, magnificent hall opened before them, its vaulted ceiling resting on golden columns. All around stood giant knights as guards, silent and motionless. In the center stood a throne of gold. Emperor Karl was fast asleep, his chest rising and falling with every slow breath. A silver-white beard flowed down from his face and wrapped itself twice around the throne. Awestruck, the shepherd boy sank to his knees before the emperor's majesty. Just then the ruler raised his head, eyelids half opened, and his gaze met the boy. Slowly, his lips moved, and with a deeply resonating voice he boomed, "Speak! Do the ravens still soar around our mountain at this hour?" His voice catching in his throat, the boy humbly replied, "They are still circling the summit, your majesty." The emperor bowed his head as if in pain, and with a plaintive voice he said, "Ah, so then we must sleep again, until we get news that the ravens are no longer flying. Then I will rouse my knights, and we will fight until victory is ours, and I can hang up my sword for good." He closed his eyes, his chin fell on his chest, and he was asleep again. The dwarf beckoned the boy to follow him, and silently led him out of the hall. They climbed over boulders, hiked through meadows until they reached the shepherd's flock. There, the little man handed the boy so many heavy golden coins that his satchel was overflowing. Before the shepherd could utter a word of gratitude, the dwarf disappeared as if he had dissolved into thin air. The shepherd boy grew up to be a wealthy landowner, was well liked by all, and never let a word slip about his encounter with the Emperor Karl. In my childhood dreams, I was the messenger who brought the news to Kaiser Karl that there were no ravens circling the Untersberg. He left his lair deep in the mountain, and I joined his army of knights. I was fighting among the ranks of his bravest to bring on the Golden Age. I could hear the clanging of swords hitting shields, and glorious days lay ahead. Sometimes I was sure I saw the Emperor's sword glinting in the sun in the old pear tree in my grandparents' garden. Oh, how the world could use a Charlemagne fighting for it right now.